Hi everyone, my name is Yukari and I will be making daily process videos for the month of July as I sketch in my Hobonichi Techo for World Watercolor Month. So let's get started. Today is day 23 and our prompt is home. I am from a tiny island in Japan called Okinawa. And every time I think of home, I think of Okinawa and my mother. And yesterday, I made a dish that Mom used to make that uses bitter melon. And you don't often find that in grocery stores. At least I don't in Arizona. But here, in Massachusetts, or at least in this one particular grocery store, I was able to find it. So yesterday I made some. So I took a picture and that is what I'm sketching today. Okay, so here are my supplies. And I'm using a number 10 brush. And I'm also going to be using number 2. I'm going to take my spray bottle and wet my pan of watercolors. I'm using 2 greens today. I'm using Jadeite, and I'm also going to be using sap green, and those are going to be for my bitter melons. And then I'm going to be using 3 of my favorite colors that I use for cooked and baked things, and those are Quin Gold, Quin Burnt Orange, and also Burnt Umber. And then today I'm going to be using ultramarine violet for my shadow. And then also ultramarine blue to add to the shadow. Okay, so I am going to be sketching today. And I decided to show you my reference image here. So I'm starting with the stir fry, and so I am going to sketching some tofu here. And I'm not going to be exact, just kind of lay down some shapes. And so these melons, you have to cut them in half and then scrape the insides and then slice. And so these are the slices that you see. And this stir fry, you can use pork belly, bacon, and my mom used to use Spam. We had some bacon bits, and so that's what I used yesterday. And everything looks the same color, and it gets kind of difficult to sketch, but there's some eggs in there and then the rice. And the bitter melons have the jaggedy edges because they're bumpy. So I'm using cobalt turquoise, which I did mention in my supply list. And that's the plate. It's kind of the same color as my coffee mug yesterday. Well, it is the same set. And so just lightly doing the background. And then I am going to let that dry. And I am going to be painting my bitter melons. So I'm using sap green first. was going to start with Jadeite, but I decided that I was going to start with sap green, and that's going to be the undercolor. And then I'm going to come back with some Jadeite and start adding the bumps. And so you're going to see it. I'm just kind of creating these wavy, and because the area is still pretty wet, the colors are mixing in pretty well. And if I use a darker version or just load more pigment, I can get that lovely dark color. And you know, this is just random strokes, doing just best to be random, making kind of C curves along the way. Just depending on the area. And so now I've loaded more sap green to add different greens here. And I'm using Jadeite mainly for the darker areas. And the bitter melon that I bought for my dish was a Chinese bitter melon, and there's also at the grocery store an Indian version, which are bumpier. And the reference image that I have is Okinawan bitter melon, which are kind of a cross between the Chinese and the Indian. They're as long as the Chinese, but bumpy like the Indian. So that's kind of what I remember. But for my dish, I use the Chinese bitter melon. And so I just used a little bit of the ultramarine violet to create a shadow under my melon. Okay, so now back to my dish. So I am using Quin Gold for both my tofu and my egg. So that's going to be my egg, whereas the cubes are all tofu. And in this dish, you fry each component separately. And so I did the tofu first, just so that they maintain their shape better. And the egg, you scramble 2 eggs until they're almost firm, but you stop cooking before then. And then the last thing that I did was to combine the bacon bits and my bitter melon to stir fry. So sap green for the bitter melon. So this is just really the first layer of for the stir fry, and I'm going to be coming back a little later with orange and brown. And for the rice, so you know, rice, you think, oh, it's just white, but of course I'm not going to draw each grain, but if you use the shadow color, which is ultramarine violet or some kind of a purpley color, and just create these little dots, squiggles, you know, because there are shadows. And if you notice right here, you see shadows. And so that is what I'm trying to add with this purple, and then using ultramarine blue straight to create deeper shadows. And so I'm going to outline the ridge of my plate. And now I'm using Quin burnt orange. And to give it sort of that fried look. And there are times when, if things are slightly burnt or has a little more charring to it, I'd use more burnt umber, or I would add a little red to it. And you know, this dish, after a while, all the colors meld because you do put this miso sauce on top after you stir fry everything. And even for the bitter melon, and I'm going here with a little bit of Jadeite for the darker parts. And I did add a little bit of burnt umber to my green. And trying to add a little bit of those bumpiness to the edge of my sliced melons. And I am going to be using a little bit of pyrrol maroon for the bacon bits right there. You know, food is always fun to illustrate because, well, they're just, you don't have to worry about being perfect, just kind of an impression. And now I'm just going to be adding some shadows to my stir fry. And then with a little bit more of the cobalt turquoise, I'm just adding more color to my plate. And I'm also going to be adding shadow to my plate using ultramarine violet. And then one of my favorite things to do with shadows is while that is wet, add ultramarine blue to where the subject meets so that there's a deeper shadow. All right, so now you get to see my finished product. All right, so here is my completed page. And you'll see here where I've added ultramarine blue at the very edge. And that just kind of, well, that just adds a deeper shadow. And so this is not a complete recipe, but I did include the ingredients and the basics, how to, so that I can remember. I've never made this dish before. It was always Mom that made it, and I haven't had this dish since I was in high school, so I didn't quite remember. I do remember, and I did remember the taste, and it's really an acquired taste. My daughter, who had it with me yesterday, didn't really care for the bitterness, but it has lots of medicinal properties, I guess. Reducing your blood sugars and so forth. So, you know, Okinawan diet is really healthy for you. And I know that there are even books written about the Blue Zone diet that includes Okinawan dishes. So anyway, if you ever want to try it, I hope you do. So yeah, this is it. And thank you for watching. And then we will see you tomorrow.